Shri Rama Rama Ramiti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatturyam Rama Nama Varanani. We delight in the beautiful name of Sri Rama. Again and again, for even once remembered, the name of Sri Rama bestows the fruit that is equal to the recitation of 1,000 names of the Lord Vishnu. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Well, you're very welcome to the continued series on the story of Rama. And you might have concluded that last week was the final conclusion, since we left Rama and all his retinue happily going back to Ayodhya after a total of 14 years of exile and successfully defeating Ravana, rescuing Sita, and certainly when we all celebrate the Diwali or Deepavali festival, we can picture rows and rows of lights welcoming all the Rama, Sita, Lakshmana, and all the Vanaras and so on in a victorious procession back into Ayodhya with joyful citizens. But you see, that fairy tale, they lived happily ever after, that is suitable for children. But real life is not like that. And when we say real life, you know what I mean exactly. There are so-called trials and tribulations, and we don't know if you end the story there, as many versions do, then you don't really know what happened to Rama. How many years did he successfully rule as a king with his wife as queen by their sides? Did they have any children? And what was the end of it? How did they leave? How did they exit the drama? And so there is a portion, finally, a book, Uttarakandam. Now it is quite controversial. Was this originally part of the Valmiki's Ramayana? My personal opinion is absolutely yes. But many people want to leave on the note, and they lived happily ever after. So that if you see all the various other versions of the Ramayana, the Adhyatma Ramayana, for example, that deals with more the divine aspect of Rama and the philosophical aspects of the story. And if you see Tulsidas's beautiful song, poem, then you'll be tempted to think, well, this addition is unnecessary. I can assure you it's necessary. But let's review where we left off, and we'll see that, of course, Rama could have claimed all the various kingdoms, but he didn't. He had no greedy eye on the wealth of the kingdoms, let's say, of Kishkinda or of Lanka, and which he had transformed from a bad situation to a good situation. So not only was he dedicated to Dharma in terms of Ayodhya, not only was he dedicated to Dharma in terms of destroying Ravana and the asuras there, but he was also dedicated to transforming. So we have Kishkinda being ruled very well, and we have Vibhishana being crowned and ruling Sri Lanka, and all of the Dharma is restored. And so, legitimately, of course, he could have laid his hand on a large portion of the opulent wealth of Lanka. After all, he defeated Lanka, but unlike historical accounts of conquest, The victor did not claim the land. The victor simply was there, in a sense, as an ally for righteousness, and Vibhishana happily ruled the kingdom, always given that responsibility. But on the other hand, on the occasion of Rama's coronation of Ayodhya, his gifts of costly costumes and jewels to Sugriva, Vibhishana, and all those retinues who were there, who had the status of kings, monarchs. As you know, the way that you assert your royalty is you dress in a certain way, you have palaces. It's impressive. I think it was King Henry VIII who had such costly costumes. And when he went about, he carried a whole court with him, and nobody really could compete with the royal prestige and the outward accoutrements of royalty. So things required for the coronation, you'll understand, they were quickly gathered, and all the sacred waters from all around were procured from all the holy places. And at the appointed time, on the auspicious day, Rama and Sita were royally robed and placed on the bedecked throne. And Vashishta, the great counselor, the great Rishi, he himself sprinkled the sanctified holy waters on them, and the jeweled crown of the solar race, which was Rama's race, was placed on Rama's head. We think that in France, the Sun King was Louis XIV, and there was a solar dynasty there. But way, way before that, the solar dynasty was bestowed on Rama's ancestors, even prior, going back in history. And not only the terrestrial dignitaries attended with pomp and ceremony, but also all the unseen celestials and celestial forces, they thronged to witness this august ceremony. The great rishis, they all pronounced benediction on the gathering, and the people on earth rejoiced on the whole of the earth at that time, because Rama had become the king of Ayodhya. And we can get a glimpse of the pomp and ceremony when we witness in England the recent coronation, or comparatively recent coronation of King Charles III, and the ancient historical rituals that go with it. So Rama Raja, now the king, he was a sweet combination of monarchy and democracy. You see, in these old days, the monarch, and we gather this from the various texts, how the duties of these ancient Indian kings were. And they had no time for rest. They were busy from morning to night. But they weren't absolute monarchs in the sense that they had counselors around them, and they sought the advice of people. In that sense, although it was an absolute monarchy, it was a monarchy based on wisdom, and any monarchies that were not based on wisdom, such as Ravana's monarchy, were destroyed. And so, because Rama was the embodiment of dharma, harmony, social harmony, domestic harmony, national harmony, and moral harmony, he protected this dharma with fatherly care. He made, of course, personal attention to the welfare of all the sections of his subjects. And the individuals as well as groups had free and easy access to their beloved king. Their representations were all duly attended to by Rama. So it was a democracy because people at all levels were fully represented in the council that guided the king. We find even in Ravana's court, he was seeking counsel from those around him. And but public opinion was respected, of course, and given as if it were a mandate from the divine. And because of its smooth and harmonious working, people were hardly ever conscious of a government governing them. That was Rama Rajya. Now we are told in most of the accounts that the King Rama remained for a long time as the model for the world. People were devoted to God, and righteousness would have prevailed everywhere. And there was an honest endeavor and noble toil that marked mankind. What we find today is we find that this wisdom in the hands of people who have power is sorely lacking. And when we find democratic systems that require wealth in order to rule countries, even in republics, we find somehow that true democracy is somehow lacking. Nobody really in a true democratic society was a drone in society. Peace and plenty would reign supreme, and people were all happy and contented, healthy and so on. And we find this picture portrayed when we start our story of Rama and describe what Ayodhya looks like. We can see how this is now even more enhanced under the rule of Rama. No famine and drought and pestilence, these were unheard of. Why? Because in those ancient days, there were dedicated people dedicated to prayer. Society requires food. Food is dependent on rainfall, good agriculture. This now moves the cosmic mind that moves the appropriate elements and gives prosperity to a country because you have people dedicated to this, to the welfare of all. And in such a society, we don't have any fear or anxiety. We hear today that there is a kind of happiness scale, and we are told that the happiest countries are those in Scandinavia. But I don't know, how you measure happiness. You could say maybe there's social content, maybe there's good democracy. There are many measurements that are made. But it seems to me that it has any society devoid of this element of dharma will really only be superficially happy. So rain, sunshine, these were all balanced. Lands and cows yield in plenty. The earth beamed as heaven because Lakshmi, as Sita, was sitting beside Rama. This is the picture that we have, an enhanced version of Ayodhya that we started with. But you see, that's not the end of the story. And we come now to this section, this last book called Uttarakandam. And Uttarakandam is uncomfortable reading for those who don't really understand it. We don't finish happily ever after, and there's an end to it. And so any worldly person attached to life doesn't want to read this section. But you see, life has an end as it has a beginning. We know how things began. It began essentially in heaven. It began as a drama. Philosophically, we have to take all the vicissitudes of life, so-called, and reclassify them as adventurous diversions here and there. We have to get used to that philosophy. That is really the only practical way of getting through. Don't complain. Put on tough shoes. Don't complain about the thorns. Put on tough, thorn-resistant shoes. Don't complain about potholes. Get a four-wheel drive. We have all the equipment. And so we understood the beginning, we understand the events, but now what about the end of this story? This portion, the Uttarakandam, reveals that great personalities have a grand and heroic way of ending their earthly life, their earthly career. We should all end it like heroes or heroines. And so a well-established virtuous society that is administered by an efficient government, as we've seen, is really the soil that is favorable for the cultivation of the crop of sublime thoughts and advanced civilization. And what are we doing here in a Vedanta society and all the Vedanta societies throughout the world, and those doing the work of spreading the harmony of religions, the harmony of people, by teaching a doctrine of freedom to everybody, is surely the highest good. And so any society that is based on this is the most wonderful social input, positive input. And of course, Rama's kingdom was the soil for this level of happiness and freedom. Happiness while you're here, and freedom beyond that. And so while peace and prosperity marked the life on earth, the inquiry into life in all its phases was also made in Ayodhya in earnestness. There is an inviolable law of karma, and that is that the ways of the virtuous and the wicked, the acquisition of extraordinary powers, for example, and the uses and abuses, all these matters have again engaged the attention of a ruler such as Rama and all the holy people around him who seek his company. And so the prolonged period of continence in the forest, it has its bearing also on the law of life, and also the potency of the progeny increases in proportion to the time allowed to the holy development and preservation of the urge to propagate the species. But now you see Rama is a king. And so he and Sita now can join together and perpetuate the lineage and have children. The Rama and Sita, they are, of course, the models of the principle pertaining to chastity, purity, and procreation. And it was only really after the coronation that we have heard about that Rama and Sita took to conjugal life. And following this conjugality, Sita conceived and she becomes pregnant. How else could it happen? Because Rama and Sita will pass away. Rama, the king, has to have a successor. At least that much. And all of this is for the good of society. Now, nowadays, people in developed countries are arguing over what marriage is all about. And it's a common practice to have, let us say, civil partnerships, and even marriages are blessed without any understanding of how this fits into society. The old style would say the social institution of marriage will now create a number of positive things in society. First of all, it creates commitment. And secondly, it is there in order to satisfy all the lineage on both sides, so that the offspring will be some boy or girl that will contribute positively to society. I often remember many people coming to me. Oh, I would like to find a husband, for example. Can you help me? And I said, well, I'm a monk, I can't really do that. But so my question to you is, what children do you want? That's the typical question I would ask. Oh, I want a boy or I want a girl, or how many children do you want? Okay, what will they look like? Now you'll find this formula being laid out in as serious a text as the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And there it says the formula, if you want a boy like this, if you want a girl like that, if you want a child that's intelligent, that is good looking, or if looks are not important, but you just want the intelligence, there's a formula ritualistic formula for each one. There are mantras actually for each one. And so this arrangement whereby we are generous enough to say, what progeny contribution will we make to society? And so the fulfillment of the desires of a pregnant woman in any event as an imperative condition have to be followed. What does that mean? It means that during the period of pregnancy, every effort should be made for the potential mother who is holding the future generation to be completely peaceful, calm, and to be filled with joy. Now, can you do that in the midst of a busy life, in the midst of a city environment? Maybe, if you have a mindset about it, but maybe not. Maybe it's much better to go to an environment which is much more conducive for peace of mind. Today, unusually, we have discovered many children with such things as attention deficit, and such children as children that have unusual mental difficulties, such as autism and so on, perhaps, which, or now it's diagnosed like that, where they require special learning skills. There are special classes in many schools for such children, and along with integrating them into normal classes. And what is the cause of this? I'm going to give you purely a personal opinion here. The cause is that in the 9 months of pregnancy, the most critical period in anybody's life, the mother's thoughts are the child's thoughts. The mother's nutrition is the child's nutrition. And if the mother is upset, fearful, doubtful, stressed, then this could translate, and definitely would translate, to the fetus. Just as the nutrition passes on, surely every thought acts as a vibration, and that vibration vibrates in every cell of the body, including that cell or accumulation of cell, the growing numbers of cells, which we call fetus. In a sense, I'm speculating, but in another sense, I'm telling you, certainly, that thought plays a major role in all cellular development. And what is pregnancy but cellular development where there's a future life inserted? And the Eastern belief is that because of the cyclical law of karma, that already the circumstances, resources, and environments of a child are pre-selected by an ongoing urge toward perfection. And so, failure to provide such an environment to a pregnant woman leads to complex in the psyche of the issue. Now, Rama is aware of this fact. And so he asks Sita, who is bearing his children because what is there, Sita has twins. And so he asked Sita if there was any desire that was lurking in her heart that has to be satisfied, because we have to make such a person completely satisfied. We have to nurture the one who is going to nurture future life. And so she gives out that she has longed to visit the holy people, holy company, all the ashrams and so on and so forth on the banks of the Ganga, and to receive the blessings of holy company. And so Rama, as her husband, assures her that he was going to give effect to that holy intention of hers as early as he possibly can arrange it. And as a model king, Rama is ever intent on hearing the views also of his subjects. particularly on matters pertaining to his rule. How am I doing? And very often, kings and queens or rulers are overthrown because the ruler is out of touch with his people. He doesn't know what's going on, insulating in his own palace. Even in the life of Buddha, we might see this. And we certainly saw this, for example, in France during the preconditions to the first revolution. So it's important that the vast majority, the common people who are earning a living and contributing the bulk of the income to society, that these people are looked after and content. And so how does a king do this? He gets feedback from his courtiers. His courtiers were requested to report on all the views in the kingdom, whether they be good or bad or indifferent, without reserve. Be fair. Don't only tell me the good news. That's not very helpful. Tell me what the problems are, so that together we can address these issues. And so their frank version of their feedback was that, well, all the acts of Rama were extolled to the skies. There was one single deed that they attributed to him, and that was denounced as somehow anomalous, a bad example. And Rama was keen to find out, what is this? And it turned out that the citizens, unaware, you see, Sita has been abducted in the past, and Ravana is there, and she's lived in Ravana's company, according to them. And we don't know what happened there in the palace. But in order to remove any vestige of scandal, you recall that Rama, having been presented with Sita, rescued from Sri Lanka, and we see a strange uniting that took place. It wasn't intimate in the first place, because Rama now is not just the husband. Rama is not just the beloved of Sita and vice versa, where they are pining for each other's company and distraught by their separation, as we had heard. But Rama now has to understand, wait, I have to be an example. I have to play the role of the Dharma. I have to be a king. I have to set an example. I have to make a demonstration. And so you'll recall that Sita willingly went into the fire and came out unblemished and demonstrated her purity. Of course, Rama knew it already, but this was the demonstration that was necessary as an example. And so this was fine, but Lanka is far away. Ayodhya is in a different place. New citizens are there. New generations are there. And so they're far removed from this example. And the worst thing that happens in society is gossip. Gossip is probably the most evil sin of speech you could ever imagine, because it contains half grains of truth, an insatiable appetite to learn something. And many of our modern day magazines and newspapers and media are satisfying the thirst that society seems to have, almost insatiable thirst for getting some scandalous news somewhere. And so his taking back Sita, who happened to be kept on the lap of Ravana, was seen to be a bad example. This is the way they were phrasing it and thinking of it in the citizenry of Ayodhya. And so it happened that Rama heard from his courtiers, his investigators into the will of the people, or his status as a king, and how he was ruling, and whether things were going on well or not. He got this feedback. that this issue was the source of many a domestic quarrel. And it was cited in order to escape disciplinary action. And so, yes, in a family, it can be a quarrel. There can be, for example, unfaithfulness. And, well, Rama took Sita back. You take me back now. Those kinds of arguments were developing. And so the king's precedent, or seen to be a precedent, had therefore caused a problem to the people in general. They were worried on this score. Everything else was fine, but this one outstanding issue was there and fed by gossip, by wrong assumptions. Now, Sitapati, that is Rama, gave serious thought to this particular issue. How can I rule and be seen to be an example of dharma? You see, it's not am I an example of dharma, am I seen to be an example of dharma? That is very important. I recently came across an article and information on the King Edward, who was made a king after King George V. And he abdicated because he decided to marry a divorcee and so on. But there were other factors. And he seemed to be quite irresponsible. And so the Prime Minister of the time, Baldwin, actually, at the request of his own father, of King Edward's father, even when he was a prince, was asked to investigate the future king. And the investigation continued when Edward had become king. Dispatch boxes had been sent, red boxes, and found that, well, maybe there were some alcohol stains, wine stains or something on the dispatches, and boxes were left carelessly open for anybody to see. He'd become a security risk. And so, over his wish to marry, in his own words, the woman that I love, he eventually had to resign, or he abdicated on the pretext of this, but really it was a plot. You cannot have a king who risks our national security, and who, by the way, was seemed to be an ambassador in talks with Hitler, Adolf Hitler, and so on. So the whole thing was not satisfactory to the government of the day. And so these are not just contemporary issues. We can see these are ancient issues also. Anyway, Rama knew that he had it publicly proved in Lanka by fire ordeal that Sita was absolutely stainless. He knew that, and all the witnesses there knew it. But reference to it wouldn't improve the matter, because people say, yes, well, you say all of that, but maybe it's just marketing. Maybe it's just, the publicity from the palace that goes out to squash any rumors. And it would rather complicate matters if he continues with this. No, we dealt with it in Lanka already, or just afterwards. And so a conflict has arisen now between Rama's duty as a husband and his duty as a king. And so he had to subordinate, really, his duty as a husband to that of a king in this instance. This is very painful. And anybody who has a level of attachment will find it not easy. But Rama is not only the embodiment of Dharma, but Rama is also Vishnu incarnated. So it was no easy business to be a model king. And in the public interest, Rama has to resolve the issue. He resolves it by renouncing Sita. And I'm going to pause because this is a shock. So Raghupati, the son of the Raghu race, Rama, he summons his brothers into his presence, and he briefly makes this announcement of his tragic decision. And so, I know Janaki is ever pure. I know that, you know that. But our people haven't understood it. Why? Well, because people superimpose their own blemishes on others. And so by owning, in their view, a polluted wife, the king has set a bad example to the public. And so that's the charge, really, that sits against me and against you and against all the rulers and the governance of the region, of the kingdom. And actually, this issue will get more complicated as time goes on. The more we deny it, the more complicated it will be. So if I choose to defend her innocence, then it won't work. And so truth will triumph in the end. That's a wonderful motto. This is a motto taken from the Mundaka Upanishad. Satyameva Jayati. Truth eventually will triumph. And so now he says, in his capacity as king of Ayodhya, he will have to banish Sita from his kingdom and uphold the moral standards of the land. And so he says, I request you, my brothers, please don't discuss this issue with me. I've made up my mind, and please submit to my will. I'm making the right decision, painful as it is. And so with throbbing hearts and with wet eyes, all the three younger brothers, they bow their heads in silent submission to this. And Rama speaks further. So Sita, Mitali, she desires to visit all the rishis on the banks of the Ganga and receive their blessings. And so I've agreed to fulfill this desire of hers long back, but I was just finding an opportunity. And so on that issue, on that plea, I'm asking Lakshmana to escort her tomorrow and take her to the southern bank of the Ganga. And there, let her now enjoy the company of the holy people. But there you'll have to break the news to her, my painful decision, that I have to abandon her now and in the public interest. But snatch yourself away quickly, leaving her entirely to her fate, but not entirely, because, of course, nearby is Valmiki's ashram. And Lakshmana bows in heartrending obeisance. And the brothers withdraw, and naturally we can view the scene, their depression in spirit. And so Sita is told by Lakshmana of the excursion to the hermitages in the forest, and she receives the idea with great delight, and she gets ready in no time at all. This is her fundamental desire, to spend some time in holy company while she's in the state of pregnancy. And so Sumantra, the palace charioteer, drives them fast southward. And while Janaki is joyous at the prospects of receiving benediction from the holy people, the holy men and women there, Lakshmana, on the other hand, is gloomy. His whole countenance is unusually depressed. And Sita, of course, naturally notices her brother-in-law in this condition. She notices the contrast in the moods. She is happy and joyful. She's looking forward to this trip. But he, on the other hand, is very gloomy in contrast. But she can't get out of him what's wrong. And she can't engage him in conversation or questioning about her. So they move on in silence. She joyful and yet a little anxious. He in complete depression. And he conceals and keeps his agony to himself. And then crossing the Ganga by boat, the outskirts of Valmiki ashram was reached. Lakshmana then bitterly cries and announces, Mother, see, your Lord and my brother Rama loves you as his own life. But I have to say, in order to save Ayodhya from the public slander prevalent now, the king of Ayodhya relinquishes relationship with you for having been allegedly tainted by Ravana, according to the rumors of the people. And then the pain-stricken Lakshmana, as was instructed, vanishes very quickly, lest the sight of the pang-stricken Sita should foil his very mission. Now, of course, this is a tremendous blow to Sita, as we can expect and imagine. And she swoons, she falls flat as if struck by lightning. And so, in this condition, it took some time for her to recover. But you see, she is a pure character. She wakes up to find herself abandoned and left all alone in the world. And naturally, she cries bitterly over her lot. You can find no more tragic figure. First of all, taken away from the luxury of a palace, living the life of uncertainty in the forest, and then being taken by Ravana, and then enduring all the taunts and essentially the confinement in Lanka, and finally being rescued by Rama, and yet having to go through the ordeal to prove her purity. And now this, where everything should be joyful, look at this tragic thing that's happened. And actually the thought, she's there by the river, let me drown myself, put an end to it. But then you see, as soon as this flashes in her mind, she adjusts her thinking. This happens to all of us. In the midst of unexpected tragedy, an unexpected blow, so-called, in life, we have to receive the blow, but we also have to adjust our thinking. And so this is the same. We have to think beyond our selfish concerns, beyond our own life. We have to look at what is the action that we have to do for the greater good. This is what Rama has done. Sita now also must do this. And so, of course, the second that she comes up with this idea of doing away with her life, she didn't have the freedom to put herself at an end because other lives are there, her own offspring are there. She's pregnant. Rama has deposited his seed in her womb, and the duty of fostering it was hers. And so her loud and pathetic lamentation was resonant all around because she cannot do anything. She has to go on. And of course, the sage Valmiki involuntarily directs his step to the locality from where the wailing comes. He hears this. And he stands near for a while in contemplation, and being a great sage, tuned into cosmic mind, intuits the developments. He understands what has happened. And so he addresses Sita, he lifts her up. Daughter Sita, don't be in distress. I am the Maharshi Valmiki, and you are by the side of our ashram. And so this presents you with a new adventure. A new life commences for you here, something that enhances your spiritual life. Is it dharma to leave an innocent woman in the lurch in the name of upholding dharma? She says very blatantly. But the higher wisdom of Sage Valmiki says, no, there are higher aspects of dharma And these are very hard to understand. Rama never deviates from this dharma. Just to remind you, dharma is those thoughts and actions that bring everything into harmony, be they in the cosmos or in your individual lives. And so Sita says, well, if I had not come upon your holy self, then perhaps I would have perished. And so Valmiki says, well, providence, it brings protection to the good. This is a wonderful assurance. And it's something like a mantra or an affirmation that we can repeat often, that providence brings protection to those who are good. What does it mean to be good? Good thought, good behavior. We can follow some of the Eightfold Path of Buddha, and that will set us right. Right company, right occupation, right thinking, right meditation. See, all of these things. And so providence brings protection to the good. This has to be repeated often, giving us the assurance. Along with this Satyameva Jayate, truth alone triumphs. Truth alone triumphs, and providence brings protection to the good. What do we mean by providence? The inherent goodness in life. Because what we call life and the universe and our experience is really a manifested version of the divine. But Sita says, yes, but you don't understand. I'm in the family way. And so I require actually a congenial place, something where my mind can be settled. And Valmiki gives her this assurance. Well, just here, nearby, at this very juncture, is this ashram, and it's the best place suited for your living. In the palace of Ayodhya, unfortunately, all your thoughts would have all been earthbound. They would have been distracted by domestic issues and this and that and the other. But here, in this place, you have a great advantage. Because the seed that is taking place in your womb is bound to be affected by such thoughts. And whereas the holy thoughts which you involuntarily imbibe here will have a salutary effect on the child in the make. And blessed are you that circumstances have brought you on to this sanctuary. Now, this applies to all of us. You remember Sri Ramakrishna's exhortation to householders, lovingly repeat God's name, do it frequently, do it all the time. Repeat his glories, strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love. Not just repeat them, but feel these glories all around you. And then keep holy company. And from time to time, go into solitude. Well, Sita has the opportunity for all of these four things. And so, one thing more, he says. See, there's a women's section attached to this ashram. We have it in our own ashrams, except here we haven't accommodation here in Dublin, but generally speaking, that's the idea. You'll perform austerity joining the other women. The more you get absorbed in your tapasya, in your spiritual life, the better it is for you. In other words, the more you indulge your thinking in spiritual things, then the better it is for you. And the better it is for your children. Your name and your identity, we will keep completely secret. It'll be completely concealed. You'll be an anonymous person. You won't register as a queen or anything of this nature. You'll be, just known as a member of our ashram. That's all. Not even a name. And so while returning to Ayodhya, Lakshmana and the charioteer Sumantra, they are, in contrast to this, sorely grief-stricken. And it is Lakshmana who says, you see, in order to redeem the father from a promise to a woman, Rama took a rigorous forest retreat involving untold discomfort. He's recalling this. Sita's captivity, suffering, and fire ordeal were all the result of it. And these ignorant people of Ayodhya, they don't know of Sita's successful fire bath that she had there. In response to their scandal, Rama, in his capacity as the king of Ayodhya, has banished her. How are we to reconcile ourselves with this kind of action? He's questioning Rama's action, as no doubt many are. But Sumatra, who had some wisdom, because Lakshmana, of course, as we know, has a level of impulsiveness. And he says, well, look, Rama's deeds are ever the expression of dharma. This is what we call shraddha. This is called faith. I have faith in Rama as the ideal king, and as the ideal manifestation, the avatar of this age that brings dharma to all, appropriate for the time. And yet, acting as a lasting expression and example of the highest dharma, that is commitment to your duty, your divine duty. He has proved himself the ideal son, and in the forest he proved himself the ideal man. As an ideal son, he submitted to his father's will in the circumstances. He didn't get out of it. He didn't even suggest getting out of it. And then, as an ideal man in the forest, and through her suffering and captivity, Sita has proved herself to be the ideal woman. And Rama may have a great purpose behind his banishing the innocent Sita on the plea of functioning as a model king. So let's wait. Let's see the developments. Now, several rishis that were headed by Chavana, they came on deputation to Rama, and they submitted that, look, you see, a peaceful life on the banks of the river Yamuna was impossible because of the wholesale destruction to life committed by a cruel demon that was known as Lavana. And he had inherited from his father, Madhu, a spear that was given by the Lord Shiva. And that spear in hand, nobody can vanquish him. And that is the secret of his strength. As long as this demon is alive, there's no possibility of developing it to Madhupuri. And in this way, they had already presented their plight to him. Now this is another aspect of what is going on in the palace. The choice of killing Ravana and establishing the kingdom of Madhupuri fell on the brother Shatrughna. And Shatrughna is one of the brothers of Rama. He was crowned in Ayodhya itself as the king of Madhupuri, and then dispatched with an army for colonizing this area. So sending the army and people in advance, Shatrughna naturally moved quite slowly. But on the way, he stayed in the night. It so happened at Valmiki's ashram. He stayed there as a distinguished guest. Now, he didn't have any knowledge that his sister-in-law was staying there at all. But that very night, Sita gave birth to twins. These twins were called Kusha and Lava. And Valmiki names them in this way, Kusha and Lava. But that incident wasn't revealed to Shatrughna. He was completely oblivious to this. See, 12 years after killing the demon Lavana, way back, and establishing the prosperous kingdom of Madhupuri, Shatrughna was returning. He was on his way to Ayodhya for just a brief change, a visit. But on the way, as usual, he halted at this Valmiki's ashram. And here's a party, this is some years later. He and his party, they hear young and melodious voices And what were they chanting? They were chanting the story of Rama. They were doing it rapturously. The joy of listening to it kept everyone awake all through the night. But they were not to probe into the ways of the ashram. Where did they get this story from? They didn't ask. And so we leave it there at that section, and we'll pick it up with divine blessings next week.
Hello, Swami.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on all. Thank you.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you.